Hello, my name is Shahe Mangarian. I am the Mentorship Program Director at International Armenian Literary Alliance, IALA. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate my dear friends Arthur Kayzakian's amazing new poetry book, the Book of Redacted Paintings. More about that beautiful work later. For now, we would like to thank our partners and sponsors, National Association of Armenian Studies and Research, NAASR, Krikor and Clara Zohrab Information Center in New York, and our newest collaborator, Rawi, the Radius of Arab American Writers. We're so excited that we're working with them with this event. Today's reading and conversation is part of the Literary Lights reading series sponsored by IALA, NAASR, and Zohrab Center, and Rawi. We are midway through this monthly reading series featuring new works of literature by Armenian authors. Each event will feature a writer, editor, or a translator reading from their work, followed by a discussion with an interviewer and audience members. And audience members are encouraged and invited to read along with the series. In September, we will spotlight Nancy Agabian's new novel, The Fear of Large and Small Nations. And in October, we will feature Mashinka Fruent Hagopian's The Institute for Other Intelligences. We urge you to become members of any of these organizations by visiting their websites. Your support is urgent at a time when reading and writing has fallen victim to political extremists and censoring of voices have become the new norm. So therefore, I'm grateful for this Literary Lights series. Today, we are welcoming Arthur Kayzakian, one of my dear friends. I've been working with Arthur for, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know anymore. We have a small group of poets that we get together once a month. And when Arthur first came, he was this new guy with this new voice, incredible ideas. So, I mean, seeing this work right now, and reading his book has been so exciting for me because I saw some of these poems actually take birth at our gathering with our friends. We also have the honor of welcoming one of my poetic heroes, Kaveh Akbar, who's going to conduct the discussion. By the way, if we combine their last names, Akbar and Kayzak, Akbar in Arabic is the great, and Kayzak in Armenian is lightning. We will witness a formation of a new dynamic duo, the Great Lightning. So let me give you a brief background about Kaveh. Kaveh is the author of 2 amazing poetry books, Pilgrim Bell and Calling a Wolf a Wolf. He is also the author of a chapbook, Portrait of the Alcoholic. Actually, that's where I got to know Kaveh, when I read that chapbook many years ago. Kaveh is the recipient of many amazing prizes and fellowships. He's the founding editor of Dive Dapper, a home for interviews with major voices in contemporary poetry. Born in Tehran, Iran, he teaches at University of Iowa and in the low residency MFA programs at Randolph College and Warren Wilson. His poems appear in the New Yorker, Poetry, PBS NewsHour, Paris Review, Best American Poetry, the New York Times, and elsewhere. Kaveh currently serves as poetry editor of The Nation. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Kaveh Akbar and Arthur Kayzakian.
Woo! Thank you so much, Shahe. Thank you. It's my luck to get to be here, truly, sincerely. I was saying in the green room before all this began that all I ever really want to do is wave my pom-poms and cheer for my dear friend Arthur, who has worked in big and loud and quiet ways for a long, long time, culminating in the release of this book here, which is incredible. And I'm sure there are links in the chat to it. Here's one that I'll post like 8 more times before the end of the conversation. Buy 12 copies for all your friends and enemies and associates, acquaintances. I don't know what holidays are coming up. 4th of July. I don't know what holidays happen in June. I'm not a good like American holiday knower about her. But yeah, it makes a good 4th of July present, I guess. I don't know. Or at least makes a provocative 4th of July present. Summer solstice, yeah, summer solstice is a good one. The spring solstice is the beginning of the Iranian New Year, so maybe the summer solstice can, I don't know. Anyways, I'm so happy to be here, to be celebrating Arthur, to be celebrating this book. A thing that a lot of contemporary poetry books try to do, and often with like variable degrees of success, is to try to create some sort of thematic through line, or, you know, people call them project books, right? You know, you have you're triangulating like the journey of Charles Darwin to the Galapagos with your parents' divorce or something like that. And then you're writing like 40 poems about like Darwin's Origin of Species, but you're really writing about, you know, your dad cheating on your mom. Well, I'm sorry if anyone's writing this book, but you know, this is, you know, that sort of project book is so in vogue right now in contemporary American poetry. And it's fine, but so often when I'm reading those books, it feels like somebody wrote like 4 or 5 of those poems, and they really, you know, those ones really, and then they were like, well, I guess I have to write like 35 more in order to make this a book, right? I guess I have to write. And so you can always tell when you're reading that book, like these were the 5 poems that the poet had to write, and then these are the 35 that they just wrote to fill out the book. And I feel like this book, one of the things that I love so much about this book is that it really is a narrative, like a straight narrative from the beginning to the end, right? It has a beginning and a middle and an end, and it has characters and a narrative arc, right? I mean, it's very much poems. Like, you never call it like a novel in verse. You know, you have poems that, you know, you'd recognize from across the room as literary poems, even though they move around the page and there's visual elements, right? But there's a narrative here, there's a story being told, and there's a propulsivity to it, right? Despite the fact that, you know, poetry is made of endings, you know, all of these lines ending and these stanzas ending and these sections ending and the pages end, right? There's so many endings, right? But there's such propulsivity here. And that's like, you know, the poems themselves, you'll hear, I don't need to testify to you because you're about to hear them, and you'll understand, you know, why we're all so excited about this book when you hear the poems. But just like understanding that the book as a whole is just so readable. I mean, like, I know that we all talk about making poetry manuscripts so that someone can start on the first page and read to the last one, and we don't need to do a show of hands, but like, how often do you actually read a poetry book like that? Like, how often do you actually like start at page 1 and then like emerge 2 hours later at page 70 having finished it, right? Like, usually for me, I just kind of like flip through and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, and then I go get like a glass of water or whatever. But this is a book that like is so engrossing and engaging and propulsive. And I feel like, and this is something I promise I'll shut up here in a second. But one of the things that feels so exciting to me about it is just how crafted it is in these quiet ways, right? The ways of arranging the poems and, you know, following something sort of esoteric and abstract with something very, very rooted and grounded, and the ways that Arthur is very, very generous and considerate of the reader, and considerate of the reader's delight, and considerate of the gift of the reader's attention, right? Which is a measure of time, our most irreplenishable resource, right? And so, you know, it's a great book of poems, right? The poems are crafted, and, you know, I'm sure that we'll talk all about this. The craft is extraordinary at every level, but it's also a great work of kind of spiritual maturity, right? Of, if you imagine empathy as a function of the imagination, which it is, right? The ability to perceive as real the interiority of someone that isn't yourself, right? Then there's a kind of spiritual maturation that one needs to have reached in order to like fully put themselves in the contextless vacuum of another mind, right? And that is, I think, to me, the sort of like great achievement of this book, right? Is the way that it guides me as a work of consideration, not just for the people that it writes directly about, but also for the people to whom it writes, right? The people that it's writing to. So I'm going to shut up and let Arthur read for a second. I'm going to read Arthur's proper fancy bio instead of just sort of prattling extemporaneously. And then And then Arthur and I will talk a little bit. And then there will be ample opportunity for you all in the audience to ask Arthur questions. So please be thinking about those. Feel free to just put them in the chat whenever. I'll keep an eye on it. And also, one of the beautiful things about being in a Zoom reading, right? I wish that we could all be together corporeally, and inshallah, in the fullness of time, we will be, and we're all babies in this universe and we'll live forever. But in this sort of micro moment reading, one of the cool things about being here together on Zoom is that you're all able to sort of like write down lines that you like and cheer for Arthur, in the middle of the, so like gas him up, right? Like it can be kind of funny, especially, with your first book, to just be reading to like a blinking dot on a laptop or whatever. So feel free to gas him up in the chat and cheer him on. And, when you like something, say something about it, because that can feel really good. Okay, so now I'm going to read Arthur's bio and then I'll turn it over. Arthur Kayzakian is the winner of the 2021 inaugural Black Lawrence Immigrant Writing Series for his collection, The Book of Redacted Paintings, which was also selected as a finalist for the 2021 Philip Levine Prize in Poetry. He was recipient of the 2023 Creative Writing Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. He is also the winner of the P.S. Strauss Award for Poems in Prairie Schooner and the Finishing Line Press Open Chapbook Competition for My Burning City. He serves as the poetry chair for the International Armenian Literary Alliance. His work has appeared in several publications, including the Adroit Journal, Portland Review, Chicago Review, Cincinnati Review, the Southern Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, and Witness Magazine, all of the fanciest, coolest places that you hope to get your poems published. Arthur has been published in. So now, without further ado, my friend, a poet I admire very much and of whom I am an ardent fan, Arthur Kayzakian.
Hey, thanks so much, Kaveh. That was extremely generous, man. This is really surreal for me to be in a conversation with you. I just want to say before I get started, like, I found your work when I was in an MFA at San Diego State, and I read your work on Poetry Foundation. My mind exploded the second I read it, from the precision of the imagery, and how clean and deep the imagery was. And I was like, dude, I want to do that too. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And I looked. And I was like, and that was it. That was it. Like, I saw that you were Iranian. I heard you were reading in LA. So I came to LA and we're like, oh, dude, you're Iranian and you love Packers? Fucking A, let's be friends, And then it was on, and then like, I gotta say, the big parts, like the main concept for this book. I mean, I've been writing it my whole life. I just didn't know. But what really helped was taking your workshop, which you generously pushed to about 10 weeks. It was supposed to be a 6-week workshop through the shipment agency. And we stayed on for like 11 weeks through the pandemic. And it was hard because of everything that was going on. But man, like, it really grounded my work in this like negative space and thinking about erasure and silence in new ways. And so nothing brings me more joy than to do this with you here today, my man. I think you nailed it about the spiritual maturity. I think we both share that. And before I do get started, I just want to give a shout out to your forthcoming novel, Martyr. Y'all, please, the link is in the chat. You can purchase Martyr. It has a protagonist named Cyrus. I, for one, can't wait to read it. And so, all right, so here we go. I'm gonna start with the first poem, Dear Reader. All right. Dear Reader, today I haven't thought about killing myself. Maybe because this week I have felt like smoke. I know it's strange, but most of my desires turn to ash, the aftermath of what burns. I could end it all, the mortgage, the deadlines, the apologies. Everything feels like a painting. Instead of sleeping, I am waiting for the sun, the unfolding of a world I taste faintly on my tongue, like rain, but it dissipates the way dreams do before they ask us to believe in the planets embedded in our bones. Sometimes I am the cousin of a mirror. I look like the surface of a lake when spoken to. At times, I am an anthology of hellos. Thus, I offer you this walking. Have a seat. Let me show you what's on my mind. I apologize in advance since I will ask you to see things that do not exist. You may encounter art that lives in a world that could have been. Even a pane of glass will become a painting. You will want to ask it, why is the earth hanging outside my window? Of course, there are things I regret. Sometimes I am a dress torn from its hanger. You can tell by the way I failed to say, I love you. Okay, so this poem here is this is actually my father. This is like a real photograph of him and his bell bottoms and his funky disco look, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if he did drugs, but you know, with those pants, most likely. So I just took this photo and I was like, this could be the narrative of the book. And the way Kaveh was talking about it it's absolutely on point. It is a narrative. It's something that I've been like trying to curate, you know, as a like a narrative in verse kind of a thing. So I'm gonna do my best to read this. It's gonna be like, okay, I'm done apologizing. All right, focus. Okay. My Father Under the Stars, 1979. A man stands by a redwood, a blood cluster of leaves beneath him. Later that night, lit windows in the distance. The prize for this missing man causes a fluorescence of body heat moving amid the trees. Dog and man. Flashlights burning in the wood. A tiny shred of cloth torn from his jacket. Hanging. Dark edge of a branch. This painting does not. In some version of this story, season my father was late from war. It was meant to be like that. It wasn't like a skip in the Zoom. Okay. And then this the second part is A3853. My A3853. My A3853 doesn't talk. My talk doesn't A3853. He was made when my 83853 was made. Talk much talk doesn't. Resident much talk. My father resident my talk doesn't. A3853 much. Iran made my father A3853. He doesn't talk much. He was made a resident of Iran. My father is A3853. All right. Notes on art and the implications of execution. Panache in a general signature amidst a pile of bodies in the center of a blown out church. War notes unsettled in a red notebook tucked in his right back pocket. A diagram of a torso half eaten by an atomic shell. Smoke escaping his resonated pipe. The scent of small apples and ash, a sour fume swirling in his mouth. At least the children of victors will sleep well in their new cities. At least they will keep a house with new paintings. Someone put the hex on my imagination were the last words of an artist hung from a rope. The body of the artist hanging in the air like the general's flamboyant signature. A child turned 7 in a velvet suit the first time she witnessed a bee land on a sunflower moments before the guards burst through the door? Why do we choose to ignore what connects us? Was the question that stank the camp. The general's breath smelled of pistachio on the day he ordered the death of 107 artists. Small chunks of green meat in his teeth when he smiled. The child held her father's painting to the light and the word help surfaced to the canvas. A family sips tea from imported china across an enormous painting of a woman holding a yellow letter. The artist is unknown. I have lived as an empty theater hidden in the thorax of a fly, were the last words of an artist hung from a rope. The auction was thick with the smell of cigar. Landowners raised hands and battled at the auction for the mysterious painting of a woman from an unnamed painter. How much for the yellow letter? Taunted a tall man in a white suit. The scratch on the bottom left side of the painting's frame was visible to the family sipping tea. The silence in the room about the scrape, the blade, the neck, the screams, the family before, the silence around the scratch, and the way it was stripped from the wall. A century later, students doodle little pieces of art in their notebooks the world will never see, while a historian lectures about the tragic death of 107 artists. At lunch, the historian pulls out a bag of pistachios from his book bag. I just want to say one thing about this poem. It was heavily influenced by Kaveh's workshop. All the poems that I read have been all influenced by his workshop. We talked a lot about, and I'm assuming Kaveh, we could talk about this, but like it was like, I think one of the prompts was, how does like, there were some great prompts like, what are you angry about? And then I think the second prompt the next week was, how does silence work into your poems? And it was interesting to think about, to kind of like process both of those emotions and to think about poems. And so yeah, yeah. Okay, so here's another one. I sang numbers from numbers, I sang from numbers. And in my file, I sang from numbers I file my sang. When I file my sang, there were numbers in my name and numbers sang my file. My name is sang and my file is numbers, but my numbers file with war. I sang my war from numbers while I file my name. And when I sang and sang and sang, I sang my war name from numbers in my file. Just because my father was never painted doesn't mean the painting doesn't exist. My father never had a portrait of himself, but I see it hanging on our wall. The real one involves the blast, the knock on the door, and the shuffle of feet. I like to pretend he had a portrait of himself that was stolen. According to the investigator report, it was registered as a quorum of shadows dissolving over a thin sheet of light, a man standing by a green vase, small rings of smoke traversing from his mouth. What I did not know then, his 5 o'clock shadow, his rolled up sleeves, his glower through the 3rd floor window of our apartment that said, I know well the thunderclap of sadness. What I do know well, electrons surging in his laughter. My father is alive while I write this. My father's painting is not alive while I write this. He doesn't hold a divorce letter, but it's there waiting in his hand. Experts say dark energy has its place in the universe. The black holes swirling in my father's smile. Subatomic particles, undetected by the human eye, gravitate to one another in small waves of light on the imprint of a wall. The real questions: which wall will we hang on? Which glass is our paint? For years, my father has lived with a missing painting inside him. I can see it when he tells a joke, lights a cigar, plays the piano. Mental note: the field between artwork and a wall stripped of its art is the sad craft of hands. To be held can strike a room out of its emptiness and leave a craving for the odor of someone leaving. Someone who needs a signature as proof of the fire that parted them. The sweat it takes to love, the body salt of the burglar who blackens the wall, but only the wall can feel it. I think I'm going to close with one last poem. And this is called Rain. After he hugs his family goodbye, he passes umbrellas and park benches, sees the edge of a vexed flower petal and thinks the flower is a man off to war. Without looking back, he can hear his children kicking laughter in and out of him. His wife's throat, a gleam of sandlight. 15 years later, rain beats out a puddle in the shape of his body. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Arthur. It's so cool to hear those poems in the air. Really, really, really lucky. I've spent a lot of time with this book, but this is the first time that I've heard you read from them in an extended way. So that was selfishly just my luck. For those of you in the audience, please post questions in the chat. If you want to DM them to me or whatever it's called in Zoom, feel free to do that, or just post them in the chat. If you post them in the chat, then other people can make sure that I don't accidentally miss them. So that would be helpful. But I'm going to bogart Arthur for a little bit because I have a lot of questions about this book, and there's a lot that I want to hear you speak about, Arthur. First of all, will you kind of just, for the people who haven't yet picked up this book, and I'm sure that by the end of this, everyone will have ordered a half dozen copies, but for the people who haven't yet picked up the book, how would you sort of give the flyover of the, we've spoken about the narrative and the paintings, and how would you give the sort of flyover, like this book is orbiting this of it?
Yeah, for sure, Kavi. Thanks. I would say this book orbits around, really general loss for sure. To have something, I think generally, and I'm going to use the we here, but and it could be dangerous to use the we in this case, but I'm willing to bet that if a human being has lived long enough, then we have eventually felt something get ripped out from inside of us, from someone or something or some belief, or it could be anything as grand as a concept of war to the intimate relationships we have with one another. But when something feels like it's been taken away, whether we did it to ourselves or someone did it to us, there will always be that imprint. I'm going to speak for myself in this case. There's always been a feeling that anything I've lost, its echo, its silence still lives inside, where I'm reminded of it, right? And it kind of led me into becoming, that's how I became an addict, or an alcoholic, really, because I was always trying to fill that silence, right? I was trying to fill that vase that I'm trying to put a portrait on that wall inside, but nothing could replicate that redaction, you know, that strip. And so I think it's about loss. It's about migration. It's about the kind of losses that happen when you migrate, displacement, and war is a big part of it. You know, war and the rationale that state history uses to erase those that migrate, those that are displaced, especially at a time in Iran when I was born, the Shah there was a golden couple of years, and then in 1979 or whatever the fuck, like Khomeini comes in, you know, and you know, it just happened so fast. My first memories were like, I think I'm going on a tangent, but like, you know, but like my first memories were like of Iran were like just machine gun fire and the sound of like human sounds outside the window that were not pleasant. That I knew something was like, I think I felt danger and the sound of death before I even could conceive what the concept of fear was. And I think like through therapy, I've been doing like a lot of like PTSD trauma and stuff, and reprocessing and unpacking all that stuff, you know. And so I think that, yeah, that's the book. Is essentially, in a lot of ways, it's about trying to recover what I never had.
So, I mean, so much of the book literalizes that in the paintings, right? And you're talking with these you, the speaker, are speaking with these galleries who, you know, for those who haven't encountered the book, there are several letters throughout the book, right? Written from galleries and from the FBI and from art restoration teams, and they're all saying, you know, we don't know anything about these paintings you're asking for. Can you talk about those in relation to what you're just discussing?
Oh yeah, for sure. So first it's a combination of it takes a village, right? Like so I, you know, after our workshop together, like I was thinking a lot about what remains when something is taken away, right? Like the negative. We did a lot of like there was this one essay you had, like we read about Salma Sharif. I think it was about redactions and erasure and language against the state. I remember, and that was a game changer for me. I was like, oh fuck, this is my people. This is what we, you know what I mean? Like it broke me out of like writing just conventional poetry, which is something that wasn't like, I mean, I love that. Like, that's how I started, but like, it didn't make me feel at home with it. So once after that, after the workshop, I started to like revise and work. And then I started attending a lot of generative workshops, and I was literally writing the book in workshops. Then I took a workshop with Brennan Constantine, and I started to pick his brain. I'd been taking it for like, you know, since 2017, and you know, and then I just like hit him up one day. I said, yo, like, if you have time, I just want to, you know, like talk to you about what I'm planning. Like, I'm thinking about these like missing paintings, these redacted paintings, right? The word redacted literally came out of your workshop, Kaveh. Like, I knew that this is redaction as a device that I'm trying. Like, I'm thinking about like erasure, ekphrasis, not necessarily writing about what's there, but writing about what's not there, right? So when I hit up Brendan and I was talking to him, I'm like, he kind of like nudged some books towards me, and he said, you know, you could write letters, you could like, you know, back and forth, you could do so much. And then all of a sudden, like, I just thought of the whole narrative. It just came, like I was taking a shower and I almost slipped and fell. I was like, holy fuck, you know, and like literally almost broke my like leg or something, you know, like, because I was, you know, in the shower. And then and then like, so I started to write these letters of that don't exist, because I started to imagine these characters that come to life, like writing through their hearts and minds. Like, how would this person write this. You know, I actually hit up a few people to send me recordings in the voice of these like letters, so I can have like actual real characters behind it, you know. So that's kind of where that came from, the letters. And I figured instead of like writing an explanation or just embodying the letters, you know.
I love
Yeah.
that. And I love too the way that, again, when I speak about, I spoke early on about a kind of spiritual maturation. And I think that one of the ways in which that manifests is akin to some of the stuff that you're speaking about here. You know, you read the poem with the general picking the pistachio meat out of his teeth as he orders the death of the 107 artists, right? And then it ends with the historian recounting that, and then also pulling out the bag of pistachios, right? To sort of like, you know, yoke them together. And I love too the way that the redacted paintings in the book, you know, or the missing paintings, right? One can assume that they are missing due to the violences of empire and the way that empire distorts time and deliberately obfuscates time. But then there's that poem, and I forget the title of it, but you talk about pawning your portraits for while you were high on meth, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a way in which the book is constant. You know, it's so easy, I think, to write a book that's like, all of these people are bad and look at me being good here to tell you about the bad guys. You know what I mean? And it's always been so much more interesting to me as a reader, and me as an artist, to say, you know, we're all a little bit fucked and we're all a little bit compromised, and what do we do about it, right? And I think that that is one of those, that is the kind of spiritual maturity that I'm talking about, right? That you are situating yourself on this same plane, right? Can you talk a little bit about how you think about those kind, you know, pushing back against ethical infantilization with these poems, and like actually trying to create something more complex with the poems, or ethical situations that are a little bit more complex and resemble maybe a little bit more closely the world in which we actually live, instead of trying to create like a Marvel superhero story with good guys and bad guys, etc.
Right. Yeah, for sure, Kaveh. That, like, I like how you phrase that, like spiritual maturity. It makes complete sense. I definitely implicated myself. And I think that's necessary, because I was trying to, I guess there has to be that, like, that kind of raw honesty about, like, yeah, I'm a drug addict. Yeah, I did meth, and yeah, like, I'd steal your shit, you know, because that's the fucking truth. Like, that's just how I rolled when I was, you know, when I was in my, you know, the poem you're talking about is Expensive Portraits, and it's a short one. I could
Yeah. Spin it. Let me put a quarter in the jukebox.
where well, let me see if I can find it. Shit, I hope it didn't eat your quarter, dude. Hold on. All right, let me see. All right, while I'm trying to find this, I'm just gonna talk about it. It's in the book, y'all, if I don't find it. Okay, so Expensive Portraits is a kind of poem where it implicates, like, the eye. Like, the eye is actually, I guess it's a little confessional even. And I think it's like what I find important when I'm writing is, okay, I'm going to talk about state history. That's great. But, like, I got to also talk about personal history, you know, that's because that's real. And there's one thing that I learned in staying in recovery is, what's my part in things? You know what I'm saying? Because I can't grow without knowing my part. Like, it's easy. Like, if I'm in a relationship with someone and I'm just like, oh yeah, that person was fucking crazy. It's like, well, why did you go out with them if they're crazy? Or aren't you? You know what I'm saying? Well, that's because I'm fucking crazy too. You know what I'm saying? Like, why? You know, it's like one-sided stories, and, like, I would be just like history if I would just only talk about state history. So this is like about my own personal history. And here's the poem I found. It's very short. Okay, just listen. All right. Expensive Portraits. I pawned them for meth. Buy them back when I sober up. I listen to them cuss me out like a television unplugged from the wall. Sometimes I translate voices on the radio into poems. I dial up a channel between a frequency and a scratch in the air. I pretend sunset is my friend. The night signs my release papers. I use the night signature for my pills. I read people who cover their illnesses with books. I worry that I need heroin to keep falling through a painting, with a needle of light in the arm to escape life, to become expunged. So like, you know, that part expunged, like I don't know if you guys remember, there was a time when you could actually go to jail for weed. And you know, now that, you know, I kind of have resentments against like the weed industry and state of California, because now it's fucking legal and I quit. What the hell? Right? And it smells like, I could smell it a block away, you know what I mean? Like, but I was smoking swag, you know, and I was getting arrested. And I had to get lawyers and shit. And I had like 6 cases on my like police file, that methamphetamines, Vicodin, like weed, you know. And I'm saying, like, luckily I didn't get a DUI, but I definitely, like, I think meth takes the cake on that one. You know? Driving with meth isn't exactly like the best thing to do, you know. But I had to get all those expunged, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of truth in that poem. And I felt that, I'm glad you brought that up, Kaveh, because that poem is definitely my part in things, you know.
Yeah, and again, the book would be uneven without that sort of, you know, the book would sort of like a record spinning unevenly. I have a million more things that I can talk about, but I want to make sure that I get to the things that have been asked in the chat. Bradford, I don't know that I ever, oh, yes, I did. Okay. Arthur, this is from Bradford Bancroft. As an intimate artistic memorialist, do your family and friends get sensitive when you write about them? Do you engage your family? Do your family and friends read your work at all? Are the people that you write about represented here? And feel free to, like, if you don't want to answer any of these, feel free to, you know, I don't want you to be out here being like, yeah, my mom hates me or whatever, you know.
Right. Well, you know, I'm just gonna, I'm sorry to do this, Brad, but I'm gonna have to break our anonymity. Brad was my first therapist who, just picture up there on my shelf, actually. You know, it's funny that we wrote this poem together in therapy. It was like, he's a creative arts therapist, and it was a corpse poem. And I printed that out and I put his picture on it and I gave it to him, and he said, yeah, why don't you hold on to this? Because it was only just him, you know, and I guess it would kind of look narcissistic if he had his own picture. I don't know. But in any case, Brad helped me get sober. And for the moments in my life that I would go into his sessions, I felt a speck of what I could become. And when I left his office every time, I wanted that just a little more, because, you know, the addiction came back full force, like a black wave over my mind. And, you know, for those of you that, you know, suffer from addiction, you know what I'm talking about. That voice never leaves us. It's like a neon sign that says open 24/7, you know. I forgot the question, Kaveh. What was the question?
No, you're good. And just to, you know, I too am in recovery, and this is one of the ways that I relate to the book, which I know you know, Arthur, but just making that context sort of bare for everybody, that we are sort of like speaking on this recovery idiom level too, that to which maybe everyone is, or some people here are familiar. The question itself was, do your family and friends read your poems? Do they interact with your poems? Do you share them? You know, so you shared, you know, with one person, but do you consider them when you're composing? Do you consider them when you're publishing? That's sort of the question, I think.
I think I don't consider them when I read poems to them, but if I was to consider them when I'm publishing, I don't think the book would be what it is. There'd be a lot of poems. My mom would be like, no, you need to cut that divorce line. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm going to catch heat for that.
In my case, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, you're good. Good. Yeah,
I was
please.
just gonna say, like, I've spoken with a great many writer who's like putting their first thing into the world. And everyone, like, I feel like everyone in the world who's put like a first thing into the world is scared that somebody is gonna read it and see themselves or see, a sister or an ex or a mother or whatever, and I feel like almost maybe literally 9 times out of 10, the book comes out and the poet is being like way, way, way less sort of explicit than they think they are. So like the poet is like, 2 turtles sat on the banks of the river, and then 1 turtle dove in and the sunlight gleamed on the turtle's back. And then the mother's like, I guess I like the one about the turtles. And the poet's like, didn't you know it was about your neglect? Whatever, like that sort of situation where the poet is like thinking that the reader is going to be like way more tuned into whatever. Anyways, that's not always the case, but it is like way more often the case than you think. Okay, so that was a silly tangent, but it is true.
Actually, let me ask you, what was it like for you when Calling a Wolf came out?
Yeah, my dad just acts like it doesn't exist, which is fine. It works for us. And my mom read it and doesn't really talk about it. But like my dad has come to a couple readings. And again, he just acts like he doesn't hear anything that happens like during the readings. But he really likes the signing lines afterwards. He's like, oh, like my son has made it, like that sort of vibe, when he sees like people lined up to like get me to sign their books, he's like, oh, Mr. Big Shot or whatever, but none of the other stuff translates. Like, oh, and when I got a job that had health insurance, he was very excited about that. But like none of the other stuff means anything. Like the books are just like, I could be, if I was, I don't know, like washing windows, right? It would mean the same to him. It's just like, it's a way to have a salary,
Yeah.
Okay.
So
sorry, I'm just trying to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just I'm thinking because I remember reading. I read poems about your father in Calling a Wolf, but there was also this article I read where you like described in detail the prayers.
Yeah,
it was so intimate, And
we're not here to talk about me. I love you so much, Arthur. But I promise, we can all wave our pom poms about me. I feel your love for me, but right now I want to shower you with love.
Fair enough.
No taraf, just accept my love and I'm gonna deflect it. And accept everybody's love. Everyone is here for you. So this question is from Kareen. Page 10, exiled, Los Angeles. I felt I was an exile in the US during the hostage crisis. Do you feel at home in the US? Americans tell me if you were born in Iran, then you're Iranian. I feel Armenian. So many cultural identity issues. What are your thoughts about it? That's a big question. Good luck answering.
It's huge.
In a quippy tight
you want
way.
to take this one, dude? You want to take this?
No, that's all you. It's a beautiful question. It's an essential question, but it's a big question.
Okay. So my honest truth is, I feel white around Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I feel like an immigrant around whites, which means I suffer from what David Kurdian calls a double exiled identity. Or Gloria Ann will do is Borderlands, where I'm like white passing, but in any kind of passing situation, there's double resentments on both sides, and one from me from both sides, because it never really feels like I have a place. I feel like a Coke bottle cap trying to get put on I don't know, like a fucking 22-ounce Sprite or something. Like it doesn't.
Nailed it.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's like maybe it'll work, but you can tell from the head it's different, and with police, I don't speak their language, I don't feel at home. When I was younger, I felt I never really felt at home in America. Now, don't get me wrong. The U.S. has been, it's a complicated identity for Iranian Armenian who like escaped persecution, and you know, as an Armenian, I would say I'm supposed to be grateful, right, for escaping the Ottoman Empire, generationally, right? I mean, I had nothing to do with that, you know. Tell you the truth, all of this is learned behavior for me because I wasn't born during that time. All I know is I came here holding a quarter for the first time, and I saw a shiny eagle on it, and I was like, "This is odd. They love eagles here." I know, you know what I mean? Like, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" I put the quarter into this machine, and it gave me this candy called the Jawbreakers. You know what I mean? Like it was this odd relationship that I had with America that I slowly started to realize is different than anything else. I've never felt at home anywhere, right? Like in 1977, I was born. In 1980, I moved to London. I got bullied until like 83 by European white kids because I was young and you know, and I was olive skinned and I had black hair. The only one in my class with black hair. I came to the U.S. and the bullying continued, but it continued psychologically because Americans are very soft about their bullying versus Europeans who are pretty direct with fists, right? At least that was my, you know, experience. It hasn't been all bad. Like I enjoy the freedom, or like the you know, the delusional freedom I have, whatever you want to call it. I'd say these last few years have been disorienting for all of us. I think social media fucked the world. You know what I mean? I think we blanket a lot of things today, generalize a lot of things today, but the longer I've stayed here, the more I've realized that racism has never really gone away. It never really, and you know, I have this weird relationship with racism. I don't think I experience racism the way a Black person does or a brown person does. And I consider myself a person of color, but I'm light passing. So I don't know where I exist on the white and BIPOC plane, to be honest. I don't really think I belong on that plane at all. Like I'm in the plane that flew from Iran. That's the plane I'm on. I feel like I'm still flying, you know. It makes you want to look down and say, "Oh, just keep going." You know, no, that's not where you want to be, you know. Yeah, does that answer that? Yeah.
It's great.
That was a big question.
Yeah, a beautiful question. And I like the idea of just like parallel planes, you know. Do we have time for I'm looking to see Olivia and Shahed. Do we have time for one or two more, or should I be releasing? Okay. This question is from Monir. I wanted to ask a question. Despite the grave subject matter, the poems have a musicality to them that does not make the experience of reading the poem a grievous one. How was the process of writing poems to achieve this while the poems do not move away from the central narrative core? So I think the question is sort of like, how do you delight the ear while instructing the mind, right? Like how do you make poems that sound mellifluous or music, you know, Monir says musicality, right? How do you bring musicality into poems that are about fairly serious, or, you know, Monir's word was grievous subject matter?
Okay. So Monir, it's good to hear from you. Monir is one of our fellow friends from workshop, and you know, from Tehran. And I would say that's a good question. So how do I like make sensory imagery based on these concepts, right? I think the redacted painting concept is the vehicle, the obsession. Because I've been obsessed with the space after a painting is removed for a very long time. So much where I can go anywhere and just every time I'm in a workshop, I took a lot of generative workshops and a lot of critique workshops, but the generative ones is where I wrote the base of this book. Like, and I literally wrote it in books like 4 or 5 of these. Like here's another one. I like literally finished these. You know what I mean? And I just went back and I started to construct them. But I think I think this is where I'm gonna say taking workshops in school really helped me. Like I hear a lot of things about MFAs. They're actually really amazing. What they start, like the MFA I went to was amazing at SDSU. You know, I got to work with some amazing poets, and like it was very supportive. I had to shake off the workshop voices that were hindering my work, but the techniques that I learned from my mentors stayed with me. And it became like second wind, where I could just write and I'm automatically writing in imagery. So like, for instance, if I'm writing about loss, I'll say, what does loss smell like, taste like, feel like? What does it remind me of? And you try to use concrete language of this world, right? Kind of like the you know the Russian realists like Anak Matova and Osip Mandelstam, like they came like after this like sensational devotion to God, right? Like they were like the modernists of America, like writing about today, writing about of this world. So like I have poems that are devoted to God, but I also have like they're spiritual, but the language is grounded on earth, because as one of my mentors, Ilya would say, you want to be able to bite into your nouns. And I was like, oh, so don't say fruit, say apple. Right? Like that made sense to me. And ever since then so I hope that answers your question, when is like I try to keep that practice no matter what. Like even when I'm writing a first draft, like I'll even sense it. Like I use like a word that's like a concept word, right? Like mind. Like what's a mind? We know what a brain is. Like a surgeon can remove a brain, smell a brain. Probably don't want to do that, but you could smell a brain, weigh a brain, eat a brain, right? But can you do that with a mind? What is a mind? Mind can be anything, right? It can be signified and associated with anything concrete, right? And I think that's the base of it.
I love Ilya's advice to you want to be able to bite into a noun, don't say fruit, say apple. That's very Ilya. Fantastic. All right. There's a question here that I like, and I know that you're gonna like too, Oliver. This is from Olivia, or maybe from Rafi. I don't know who typed it, but it says, question for both of you. When I started out as a writer, I didn't know how important downtime is. I thought if I wasn't working on my writing, I wasn't making progress. But I've realized creativity is fueled by doing other things. Julia Cameron famously talks about the importance of play in the artist's way. And I believe authors like Junot Diaz and Ta-Nehisi Coates play Dungeons and Dragons. Do you feel that gaming unleashes your imagination and allows your agency that fuels your writing? What is the importance of play to poetry?
100%. Like playing Diablo 4 like all the time.
What's that? I've never heard of that.
So it's a Diablo's like an action RPG game. It's like you have a bunch of these different characters and you just go slay demons. But what's really cool about it too is like
this is a game that Arthur and I play together sometimes.
Yeah.
For the contextless.
And we've been like working on a way to kind of like it was like half joking, but we were kind of serious about how we're gonna work this into this conversation. Like,
yeah, Olivia put it right on the tee for you to just like home run off.
Yeah, we've been playing, this game, and I think it's good. I think it's good to like let your inner child kind of like not be parented for a while. It helps keep, like, I really believe, like, for me, I haven't lost the privilege of playing video games. We actually had a conversation, you and I, Kaveh, about how I missed a couple dates with some women because I was playing.
I wasn't going to tell this story, but you're welcome to.
I already fucked it and just said it out loud. And I just don't want to lose that privilege, like so I'm trying to cut it down, you know what I mean? But sure. Like we talked about, like I love what you said, Kaveh, about like not losing, like give up things in the order that kill you. Right. And I'm lucky it's not killing me yet, because I can still put a cap on it. You know what I mean? Like, okay, let's put I got to put the kid, it's time to go to bed, inner child. It's like I've got these,
I'll also say that for me, it's like everything in my life is writing and poetry. You know what I mean? Like I teach officially at 3 different institutions. I have a trillion unofficial mentees and people with whom I speak about poetry across the world. My spouse is a writer. We work at the same place, which is a job where we talk to people about writing. So like so much of my life is writing, and I'm never not reading a book or listen. I walk my dog for hours a day and I listen to audiobooks, and I'm never not in this world of literature in one way or another. And so for me, it's not that it informs my writing necessarily. It's like the one thing in my life that isn't writing, is like for an hour before I go to bed, I'll like wind down and like kill some demons or whatever and like hang out with my friends who are all across the world, and it's just like, it's like literally I have so little in my life left that isn't touching writing in some way. And I guess like even most of the people we play with are also writers in some capacity, or many of them are, but many of them are like my high school friends who went on to, work at podcasts or be graphic designers or whatever, but so for me, it's just like, it's nice to let my hair down a bit and just like, and I think that recovery programs and recovery groups are sort of that for me as well. Just being in spaces that aren't all about writing, where everyone's not like sort of sniffing your butt to see like who you are and like how, and the density of aspirational energy isn't quite as suffocating. It's just normal people, getting killed by 12-year-olds and, whatever. Okay. Let's do one last question. I thought I saw, oh yeah. So, can you talk about the word expunged? And this might be specifically speaking about expensive portraits, because we've been talking for a while and this is an older question, but talking about expunged at the end of your poem, and and this is from J.R. Pulka, the relationship between the word expunged and redemption, if there is one, and if there isn't, or you could just talk about the ways that the book treats redaction and expunging and censorship, and treats those absences as presences. You said you're obsessed with the space behind a painting, and so often, when you take a painting down that's been up for years, the space behind it on the wall is like a slightly different color. It's like discolored, or it hasn't aged in the same way. So it almost literally is a presence, right? And from speaking with me and from being in workshops or whatever, that I'm obsessed with that sort of thing, right? Like the using silence or absence as a kind of negative space, or using language, or using paint, or using clay or marble, using sound as the negative space to pour around silence, to give silence shape, right? And so this is very much something that I'm interested in too, right? The ways that you use absence, or you use redaction to actually be a part of the visual field of the page in these poems, right? So I'm sort of piggybacking on the question a little bit, but if there's anything in that you can pick up off of and riff.
For sure. Thanks for that question. And Kaveh, I gotta say, dude, this idea kind of really, it was inspired by, I think you wrote one time, I forget what poem it's in, but you said, there's no word in Farsi for leaving, when you leave a glass on a napkin, and when you take off the glass, all that's left is like that, that imprint of the glass on the napkin.
Yeah.
That's where I was like, when I first read that, I was like, it felt like neural pathways started to connect in my brain in ways that I've never really, I was firing on all cylinders. I'm like, I was like, oh wow, this is some Kobe Bryant shit right here. You know what I mean? Like, like how Kobe, like he has like, he's like created, like, it's like the dunks have been done before, but they've never been done like that. And that's the kind of vibe I got. I was like, oh, this is some Kobe Bryant writing. This is some like Black Mamba shit. You know what I mean? And I was so influenced by that. And I think one of my favorite, and I'm going to get to the question, but I think one one of my favorite poems is, just because you know something, what's the point of knowing something if no one is there to see you know it? Right? Like that's like, it's like if you take a painting, is it really gone if no one saw you take it? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like all these, you know, they've culminated and they've helped me create this book. So to answer the question about expunge, it's that right there. It's the napkin with the phantom glass. It's the knowing something, but no one's there to see you know it. And it's I'd say expunged is when the state removes your criminal records, but they're still there and with the CIA. Redemption is if you burn the hold on. If you erase them from CIA records, right? I'm not, you know, we're not burning anything. I don't want to get hauled off to jail. Just, yeah.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm Judy Sarian, and this has been a wonderful discussion. And I hate to stop it because I know it could go on and continue to engage us in a very deep and wonderful and beautiful ways. I'm just totally mesmerized by discussion of words that I've never even thought about, like expunge and redact. So I'm kind of like, feel like I'm starting at at the very beginning. But yeah, I think it's time to call close to this wonderful discussion. And I want to thank everyone on behalf of the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, NAASR. I'd like to thank, first of all, our wonderful participants, poets, Arthur Kayzakian, Kaveh Apkar, and also Shahe Mankarian for joining us here today. I also want to thank IALA, the International Armenian Literary Alliance, for being who you are, for bringing all of us together, creating this wonderful space for us to hear about your writing, your poetry. It's really amazing. I also would like to thank the Krikor and Clara Zohrab Information Center, which also is a co-sponsor, and Rawi, the Radius of Arab American Writers, all co-sponsors, and we're very appreciative. So thank you all. Thank you all who joined us today for an incredibly inspiring discussion. I just feel like I'm going away with so many new ideas and things that are going to inspire me in my writing. So I just want to thank you. I can't even thank you enough. One more thing, just let you know that in September, Literary Lights will feature Nancy Agabian, who I believe is here on the call, and her newly published novel, The Fear of Large and Small Nations. I encourage you to get the book and read it over the summer. I've started reading it, and it's wonderful and very readable, and I love Nancy Agabian's work, so I'm happy to let you know about it. And please check the Zoom chat box if you for an evaluation feedback form. If you would like to fill that out, that would be great, because we could hear more about what you want to hear. And with that, I'll say thank you, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all. Oh, and please buy the books. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. Please buy the books. They're wonderful, and I'm super excited about them. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Congratulations again, Arthur.
Thanks so much,
Congratulations.
everybody.